Okay, so in the last video, we talked about the contraction and relaxation of the skeletal muscle. So real quick, I just wanted to show you that the smooth muscle does the contraction differently. It doesn't have the sliding filament theory or sliding contraction. Um, so this is a smooth muscle here. So there's this net around it, so you can see that. These are called the intermediate filaments, and that's how the smooth muscle contracts. Basically, the net squeezes it, and it doesn't. Um, so it does it completely differently. So it has this net-like structure in intermediate filaments that's surrounding it, and when it squeezes it, it gets contracted, and it kind of pops out a bit too when it gets squeezed, and then um, that's how it contracts, and it does it completely differently. And when it's not squeezed, it's basically relaxed here. So do you know what rigor mortis is? So rigor mortis, if you were to search, it's going to say it's a stiffening of muscles after death occurring 2 to 4 hours after death. So maybe you heard about that. So the term mortis means death and rigor means stiff. So rigor mortis is stiff muscles. So what causes it is basically when your body's dead, we're not able to maintain homeostasis anymore, and you're not able to maintain homeostasis, then the things get leaky. So if you remember, there's calcium leaking. So the calcium leaks, uh, which causes the process of muscle contractions right after you die. You got all this calcium that's stored in your sarcoplasmic reticulum, and it's just slowly leaking out because you're not alive anymore. And as it's leaking out, it's going to keep stimulating the muscles, and they stay contract, and that's how your muscles are stiff. When you're dead, eventually what's going to happen is the calcium will be used up, and then the muscles will relax again. So if you like CSI and stuff like that, then there's a whole recipe out there, like the time schedule that they can determine to or they use to determine the time of death. And then they say, oh, if you have rigor mortis, then they look at their chart and say this person died this many hours ago. And if they go on the crime scene and the body's in rigor mortis, and they look at temperature, and then they look at their chart and they say, oh, this is the time of death. So that's the reason why people have rigor mortis, because all this calcium keeps leaking out even after death. So the other thing is about muscle cramps. I wanted to talk a little bit about muscle cramps. So So the muscle cramps that some people get. So uh we know when you exercise you get muscle cramps, and or something like that. So basically what happens is when you're getting a muscle cramp, you're probably drinking Gatorade. And what's in Gatorade? Gatorade has electrolytes, and the electrolytes are the chemicals that are calcium, potassium, sodium, and those are things that are needed for muscle contraction. So the causes of muscle cramps is basically imbalance of electrolytes in your body. If you drink or eat enough with the electrolytes and you sweat all of it out, then you're going to get muscle cramps. And the other thing is ATP. If you go exercise eventually, you might use up all the ATP, and you might use it, or you might just use it, and then your muscles will be too fatigued in order to contract anymore. So you have to go drink some water or drink some electrolytes. Then your muscles will be going to be back to normal. So we will finish up by talking some of the other aspects of your muscles that you need to memorize. One is motor unit. Motor unit is defined as a neuron plus all muscle fibers that it stimulates. So all and it can basically control up to 2,000 muscle fibers. One motor unit can control a really big muscle, and it could be one neuron that can control up to 2,000 muscle fibers. And maybe you have a really tiny muscle, the one that twitches your eye. So we have muscles that our ancestors, um, had, and Muscles might only be, there'll be a muscle that has only 4 muscle fibers, and there might be a muscle that has 2,000 muscle fibers. And each one can be controlled by one neuron. That's one of the weird features about muscle cells. That either fibers contract all the way or they don't contract at all. So there's no halfway. So you're either contracting it or you're not contracting it. You can do experiments on this. You could do one in physiology, where you would take electrodes and you go ahead and put them on different parts of the body and you stimulate it and you see what's happening and kind of connect it to the computer, and it gives you this graph. Okay. So there can be small muscles that can be 1 to 4 muscle fibers that can be controlled by a single neuron, or it can be up to 2,000 muscle fibers that's still controlled by single neuron. And muscle contraction is all or none. So it's either contracted or it's not contracted. So what's happening here is that you got this top chart is stimulus. So the nerve stimulates the muscle. And how can you stimulate it? Well, it could be electricity, and you could go ahead and take a taser and so this is picture showing kind of the taser, and you might take a wire and have this computer slowly dial it up. So when you stick yourself on one of these pads and stimulates your muscles, you can put this on low setting. On the low setting, it's very little electricity. So that we 1, 2, 3 here, maybe you're increasing it slowly, but it's still not reaching the threshold. So for muscle to contract, it needs to reach this threshold. So here it's not reaching the threshold yet. That's the threshold. And then here 4 would have reached the threshold. So as you dial it up, the settings get stronger and stronger and so forth. You have something called threshold. That means you stimulate it. It's if it's very little, nothing's gonna happen. Nothing's gonna get contracted, and eventually, when you dial it up, and you're at number 4, it's going to reach the threshold, and your muscle starts contracting. And when you're dialing it up even more, eventually you get to the maximum, and that's when all the muscle fibers are contracting to the max. And that's what this chart is showing. This is maximum stimulus. It's not gonna go any higher than this, or here, maximal contraction actually. And then so basically you have your muscle, and then you do a cross section, and when you do a cross section you get these circular things here. So these are the cross sections of the muscle, and it's showing the muscle fibers. So they're kind of, you can see they're kind of light and then dark. What this is showing is that they're not, if they're light, they're not being stimulated, and it doesn't reach the threshold. So no stimulation for 1, 2, and 3. So here it's not reaching the threshold. And then that means here you barely reach the threshold. So some more of them light up or they go dark. And the other ones, then you see more and more of these light up, and here all of them are dark in color, and that means they are contracting until eventually you can recruit more and more of them, and then all of them at the end. And the max capacity can generate the maximum stimulus. Not going to go any higher than that as long as all of the muscle fibers are stimulated. So max capacity has been reached here, and the amount of force is not going to increase. And that's what the bottom chart is showing here, that if you don't contract, then you have 0 force. If you contract all of them, then you have the maximum contraction. And that's as much as you can lift, as much as you can push or pull using those muscle fibers. And then how do you get stronger? Well, you get stronger if you get more muscle fibers, and you can go ahead and lift up your weights, and that's what's happening. Each muscle is adding more and more of these dots, and you add more of these dots, you get stronger, you get more strength. And one of these things is you can measure is if you go up to a muscle, you measure the cross section, and it tells you the amount of force that muscle can exert. Sorry. So that's something that you can measure. So I'm not going to talk too much about this, so don't worry too much about this chart. You can basically stimulate and increase the stimulation until eventually it gets to the point where it's not going to do anything. The muscles will basically just be contracted, and it's not going to change, and basically it doesn't matter how much more force you can add. So number of motor units are stimulated at once, frequency of the stimulation. That's what these graphs are showing. All right, so about how your muscles basically work as a machine. So if you take in physics, either in high school or in college, it's one of the simplest machines. And then we call it a lever or lever, basically depends on where you're from. So the middle part of it's called fulcrum, and you got this long plank. Now think about a seesaw, and you got this kid sitting on this side, another kid sitting on the other side. So if this kid is going down, this one is going up, and this was going down, then this would be going up. So this is the simplest machine that we have. Humans didn't invent it. Animals that invented this was, or the animals. So this was already in nature. So before the human body evolved, this was already happening. So we're going to take the idea of a simple machine and then apply it to the different ways the body can move. So for example, the fulcrum and the seesaw is the same as your elbow and the kid being lifted up. And the same way your hand, and then the force over here is the kid, and same as the muscle. So we're going to basically take this and we're going to apply this to your muscles or your different part of your bodies. Lever system is going to have a fulcrum, applied force, and resistance or load. So here, this is what I was just saying. So that's the fulcrum, this will be the effort, and this is resistance or the load. So we're going to look at different types of lever systems. So we have 1, 2, and 3. So we have first class, second class, and third class. First class lever system is an example that's going to be the seesaw that I just said. So I'm gonna say that's the seesaw here. Second one, I'm gonna call it the wheelbarrow. And the third one, I can't think of anything else, so I'm just gonna call it a string. Okay, so the seesaw, if you look over here, the fulcrum, the one in the green, is in the middle. So if you look at a seesaw, the fulcrum would be a log or whatever you have in the playground, it's going to be in the middle. And then over here, the load is going to be the one in blue. And that's what's going, you want to lift up, and the force is going to be over here. The force is pulling down. An example of the seesaw would be your neck. When you nod your head, let's pretend that your face is the force. You can try doing that right now. So maybe nod your head and your face is the force. And that's the basically your face is the sorry, I think it's a force. So your face is the load, and then your vertebrae, where your skull connects to your first vertebrae, that's going to be the fulcrum in the middle. So that's the load and that's the fulcrum. And then you got this joint here. Neck muscles are going to connect, and your neck muscles are going to pull down, pull the lever down, and it's going to go up and down. So it's going to lift up your face. So that's the first class lever system here. So you have your fulcrum in the middle. This is your load, your face, and then this is the force pulling it down. Next one is going to be the wheelbarrow. The wheelbarrow is, I pulled up a pumpkin wheelbarrow here. So let me see. It's right here, yeah. So if you look at the pumpkin wheelbarrow here, the fulcrum is going to be here. This part is going to be the fulcrum. I think I had, yeah, here. So that's the fulcrum right there. So that's the fulcrum. And obviously the pumpkins, if you were to put some pumpkins here, that would be the load. So that would be the load. This is the fulcrum. And what you're trying to lift up over here is you put force, and then you put force and you try to lift it up, and then you try to move it. And that's the force basically. So you're gonna lift the handle up, and then there's going to be your force. Your force is basically when you lift the handle, then you go ahead and lift your pumpkins, and the wheel will be the fulcrum. So you push it forward, and that's going to be the second class lever system. It's the wheelbarrow. So this is where you would put the force, and you pick it up and you try to push it. And this part is the fulcrum, and obviously this is your load here in the middle. So that's what's going to be the second class liver system. And in your body, the weight basically is going to be, your body weight is going to be the pumpkins. Your entire body is going to be the weight or the load. And then your tippy toes is going to be the fulcrum. And then your calf muscles, and they're going to pull on your Achilles tendon. That's going to be pulling on your calcaneus bone, and um, that's the um, that's the force basically. So your fulcrum is on your tippy toes here. That's the second class liver system. The third one, I called it a string, and the reason I call it the string because I can't think of anything else. So over here, your elbow, you got your hand, and that's going to hold the load. And you can maybe try holding your cell phone, and that's going to be the load on your hand. And then you have this hinge here, and that's going to the fulcrum. But where is the force? The force is in the middle this time. So you can think of this as string pulling on, but in this case, it's going to be the string that's attached and pulling, and your string is a muscle. So your biceps brachii and your brachialis, that's going to be inserted on your radius and ulna here. That's going to pull on your elbow or your forearm, and it contracts, and it's going to be the third class liver system. So the way I remember it is the seesaw and wheelbarrow, and then the string. So basically on the exam, you need to remember, so on the exam, you need to remember the order in which you find the force, the fulcrum, and the load. So the first class liver system, your fulcrum is in the middle. Second class liver system, your fulcrum is at the tip. And then your body is the load, and resistance is the it's for the load or the resistance, and then the muscles pulling on is the force. So we have a bunch of simple machines going on in our body. And then for the third class, the fulcrum is here, and then you have the load is in applied forces in the middle, and then the load is on in your hand here. So we have a couple other things going on in the body. So we have something called pulleys. So for example, you got a kneecap for a reason. It's just like a pulley system right here. If you were to look here, it makes it much more efficient to have a rope go over a pulley. So if you're to kick your, pulley to make your foot kick out, it's easier. So it's these kinds of machines that you have in your body. And then how do we name the muscles? That's the next thing I want to talk about. Most muscles in your body have two places where they're attached. The place that doesn't move is called the origin. So for example, if you move your arm right now, the muscle that moves is going to be in your basically upper arm, and your shoulders, where it's connected, is not going to move. Your shoulder is not going anywhere, but it's moving your arm. So the origin of the muscle, on the other hand, is not going to move, and so basically for your arm, the origin of the muscle is going to be your shoulder, and the other end is going to be your humerus. That's where it's connected. That's the insertion. So the insertion is the place where the muscle is attached, and that's going to pull on the point. So you have two places, the origin and then the insertion. In general, not all muscles have this. So here you have your gastrocnemius muscle, and the origin is here because it's stable. It's not moving anywhere. The insertion is going to be your ankle because that's what moves. So when you're doing your tippy toes, is the part that's moving really. And last thing we have, how the muscles are named. They're named after how big the muscles are, and based on their actions, their shapes, their location, number of heads, and I think I have the action again, and the orientation of the muscle fibers. So basically, the size is, example would be gluteus maximus or gluteus minimus. And then you have the shape, your deltoid muscle, think I was trying to. So it looks like upside down delta. It's located, and then the location would be your abdominal muscles, your rectus abdominis, located in your abdomen, and that's how it's named. Number of heads, your bicep brachii. Bi means two. It has two heads. And then actions basically. Your flexor carpi radialis, it flexes your wrist, the orientation of the muscle fibers. So your transverse abdominis, we have the orientation of the muscle fibers going in the transverse direction. So we're going to do this a little bit more detail for the lab exam 3 and 4, and next two chapters we're trying to cover in the lab, which is naming the muscles. All right, so last thing I have here is the disease. So for most of my lectures, I talk about a disease or injury at the end that goes along with that topic, and that's going to be tetanus for this lecture. So most of you don't know what tetanus is, and all they know is when you go to the doctor, they're constantly being asked when was your last tetanus shot. So tetanus is a bacterial infection caused by Clostridium tetani. These bacteria produce a tetanus toxin, which causes muscles to contract forcefully. And it can cause death due to respiratory failure. However, it is preventable by a vaccine. So if you never had a tetanus shot or you never been vaccinated, you can get infection, and it causes all kinds of really bad stuff to happen. So what happens is tetanus goes to your muscles. It causes your muscles to contract to the point where you cannot relax anymore. So you end up with a kind of in a lot of pain, and then the muscles in your neck, they basically are going to contract like this, and when you get cramped or get dehydrated, they're going to pull on really hard, and sometimes it does rip the tendons away. It's very, very painful. So you get inflammation of the fascia muscles, and then eventually it can cause death. So result from overstretching of a muscle, fibers tear apart. Muscle cramps are caused by dehydration, ion imbalances, electrolytes. We talked about that. Fasciitis is the inflammation of a fascia. Plantar fasciitis, the sole of the foot. Skip to this slide. So after the invention of the tetanus vaccine, number of the cases went down. You can see that. And the number of deaths also went down. So basically what I'm trying to say to you is that if you do get a cut where you get the dirt or the rust or something like that in the wound, there is a potential that you might be infected with the Clostridium tetani bacteria, and you could get tetanus. So if you refuse to get tetanus shot because you don't know what it is and you never had anybody getting that or never heard about it, it could, this could happen to you basically. So, stay informed, maybe get your shots on time. And this is the end of this chapter. Next two chapters are the naming the muscles, which we're going to cover in detail in the lab. And then I'll see you guys in the lab. Thank you guys for listening.